for two reasons. One, at the tail end of Gene in 2004, after the band broke up, to be honest, didn't fall out of love with music. That would be ridiculous. But I did sort of fall out of love with writing songs, and you know, the music industry has a habit of leaving one a little bruised and battered. And then a couple of years later, I started writing. The first song I wrote actually was "Sing It Loud," which there's been a version of "Sing It Loud" online for 5.5 years, which nobody's ever found, on a MySpace page. That's how old it is, under a pseudonym.
Challenge.
Yeah, there's a challenge. What a boring challenge. Yeah, I mean, look at these are genuinely sensible people, I think. And then, you know, people go, I'm not going to go home and put random names into MySpace and see what comes up. You know, you might end up with Marillion, and how terrible was that? So that's the first reason. The second reason it took a while is that I without sounding pompous, I take a lot of time writing them. I pore over every note. It's not the mythology that's often spread in the media that, you know, people are somehow conduits and they just wake up one morning and go, oh, I've got this song, and it just appears and it's just fabulous, is shit. And if that is true, then it's all the bad records you've ever heard. I work hard at the songs. I do. I sometimes spend 2 months even on a piano arrangement. Every note, making decisions about it. So that's why. But it gradually got faster. After Sing It Loud, I think I wrote, I think it was My Heart's Design for Pumping Blood was second, I think. And then that was like one a year at that point. I was thinking, Jesus, you know, it was 58. And then it started to accelerate. But yeah, it you know, it takes time to write things that good. Thank you. I understand that the connection between Drop, Anchor and Be My Light, which I think is just quite good fun, and also Sub Rosa and I Want to Choose When I Sleep Alone. Yeah, I'm more than well aware of those, and I sort of enjoy the fact that I was thinking, I wonder if anybody notices, and thank you. You did, yes. But it was nothing more than being, you know, I guess just being a little bit playful. Couple of high points, and I've said this before, but I just have to say the same thing because it's true. We were playing in Milan in 1995, where it wasn't the first time we'd been abroad, but it was probably the sixth or seventh show we'd done outside of the United Kingdom, and we were playing in Milan, and we were in a little 200-ish, 300-ish capacity, sort of downstairs, slightly grotty venue. And I mean, God, health and safety laws, Jesus. They must have rammed about 600 or 700 people in there. and literally, the Olympian had been out a couple of months, I think, and the volume at which they sung back the words in an Italian accent it was absolutely, you know, that whole body hair on end experience. It was absolutely astonishing. So that was a high point. Writing, I think actually writing Is It Over was a high point for me, because that's when I thought, actually, you know, you're getting quite good at this lyrics thing at that point. Although that was right at the tail end of the career. For me, just artistically, that was a point where I thought, oh, okay, I think it's a complete song. At the time, and I still retrospectively think, lyrically, that is as good a lyric as I've written.
I agree.
Thank you. Low points were the feedback, the PA feeding back at the Royal Albert Hall, and having to go off after playing 3 songs. And speaking to our sound man at the time, and brilliantly called Snake, it was a really unusual, almost impossible to predict, technical, once in a lifetime.
You played it off brilliantly.
No, I can really barely remember. I can remember regretting my shirt choice. But yeah, that was very disappointing, because it just felt like, you know, something had conspired against us. But you know, but yes, the 2 high points, 1 low point. There is a difference between being on a record and hitting a drum or playing a piano, as I did on those records, or hitting a guitar or playing a bass, from actually, when you sing, there are words.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I mean, I wrote every word on those Dream records, and in a way, I understood that it at times probably was difficult for the other 3 guys, because it was like they didn't write those words, and inevitably they were personal to me. I'm very surprised that there were a couple of times where some members of the band felt uncomfortable with a couple of things I'd written. One time where I stood my ground, and one time where I wish I'd stood my ground. I won't say what it is, because I don't want to spoil anybody's memories of songs. You know what I mean? And which I won't do. But they were actually minor issues. I mean, God, bands have far greater issues than the issues we had. I think we managed to maintain a pretty good relationship. It was 13 years we were actually together from the very inception to the end. What was the second half of your question? So was it a burden? Yes, there was a sense of it being a burden, and there is a sense, there's a positive and a negative to making a solo record. The positive is, this is my record, and I will live or die by it. I mean, I'm sure people can hear, probably will have a greater idea of what my contribution to Gene was musically, and the bits that existed in Gene, which were fabulous, which you don't hear on these records. You probably think, okay, that's probably less of what Martin's involvement was in that band. If I miss anything, I miss when you do a gig in a band and you've had a great show, you can go backstage, and without fear of being perceived as conceited, you can go backstage, and with the other people who are in the band with you, say, we were brilliant. It's really hard to do on your own. And I know, I mean that. And to have that, you know, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 solo shows now, something like that, not many, more coming up in a few weeks, as you know, I'm sure you will. Hint. I can't go off stage and that was brilliant, wasn't it? I don't have anybody who's had that same experience as me. Even Robin, who's fabulous, who plays piano for me on stage, you know, and I'm good friends with him. He's a oh God, how brilliant is he at the piano? But it's not the same, you know, because it's not his songs. He's a session musician, and we get on. Fantastic that we get on really well, but you know he's paid to do that, and he does it very, very well. So that's the one thing I miss, having that moment. I don't get that moment anymore on my own. There are essentially two types of listener. I mean, you can break people up in lots of different ways, but there are those who want to keep things for themselves, or those who are hoarders or spreaders. I'm a spreader. When I would make people, I would actually sit people that don't laugh at that. At my age, with my legs, I come to about 10 degrees. That's the most I can do. You're a bad man. I'm a spreader. So yeah, when I was 14, 15, 16, I would buy people records that I loved, and I would sit them down and make them listen to it. I literally would. I was stereo fascist. And I would make people enormous volumes of cassettes. You must hear this, and go to the shop and buy it, and walk them, march them, with some sort of bomb belt attached to me, threatening to gentrify Barnet High Street, making people buy. I applaud that, because I think that's really important to want other people to hear something. And to be honest, I'm releasing a record on my own record label with the enormous assistance of Johnny. We need spreaders. We need people who go, come on, you have to listen to it, because I cannot compete. I cannot compete financially with Adele, or even with anybody signed to a label of any size. We don't have the money. It's purely through the sort of goodwill of people, and this is why I fear that.
Kudos, Martin. You sold 1 million records.
Well, this is true. Yeah. My mum bought 230,000.
What I'm trying to get is this record about you, and that's lovely, or is it about? I'm an artist here.
It's both. It's both. I want it to sell. I want to do this I want to do this again. This is what I do. I think I am more used to the world writing songs than anything else. And I would like to be able to afford to do another one. So yes, I want it to sell. I have different dream every night. I dream sometimes that it's going to sell 9 copies, and then another night, an equally ridiculous dream where it actually does badly, and I sell 2. No, where it suddenly flies out, and through some miracle, it becomes this record that sells 300,000, which isn't going to happen. I have I'm not going to tempt fate. I have a rough idea of how many it's going to sell in my head, and I don't know whether that's going to be enough to afford me the luxury of making another one, or to make another one I'm going to have to be quite creative in how I do it. But yeah, in answer to your question, it's both of those things. It's a personal, these are my songs, these are mostly autobiographical snapshots of various points in my life, and it is cathartic in that sense. But yeah, I want people to buy it. It's bloody good.
It's bloody good.
There are a lot of records out there that just make me want to literally rip my skin off in frustration.
But at least the reviews agree with you.
The reviews do agree, which is fantastic, and it's heartening. And then I haven't released a record really for a very long time, so I have no idea how much of an impact that has I mean, I hope it has a good impact. But the thing is, nobody really knows about the reviews until I sit at home and go, look at the reviews I got, everybody! You know, and I do worry that I annoy people on Facebook. I do sit back and think, oh God, here I am. But, and then on the flip side, I'm having to think, but there's nobody else doing this for me. It's more actually inspired. When I was very young, growing up, like most families of the time growing up in South Wales in the 70s, my family we would go to Methodist Chapel on a Sunday. And so the music I grew up actually listening to, the music that hardwired my sort of emotional responses, you know, the things that I learned, that sort of thing sounds sad, that's uplifting, that's joyous, that's playful, or whatever, mournful, or whatever it might be, was hardwired by going to Methodist Chapel, actually, which was people singing a melody with a simple piano accompaniment. When you hear the record, you know, things like 3 points on a compass, da 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 da. It's very rare in popular music to now actually have the vocal and the top line of the piano mirroring each other. It's something that happens a lot in hymns. So in terms of influence, it's more to do with that than any sort of more modern, you know, in the popular music idiom, piano and voice records. It's just me. It's actually the sort of most genuine me. It's going right back to the things that I emotionally respond to. And I've only learned that in the last few years, that actually, do you know what, I like now better than sat at a piano and singing a nice tune with some good words. And that's what, you know, that's what hymns are. Essentially, you know, when I was 8, 9 years old, I used to love the language of hymns. I didn't know what a lot of it meant as a young boy, but there was a certain stridency and a little bit of wordplay that I enjoyed, and sort of they felt powerful and emotional, you know. And I still, you know, thinking about Jerusalem now, and loads of Christmas carols and all those wonderful, wonderful melodies, like, you know, Silent Night, for instance, which is just unbeatable, or In the Bleak Midwinter, which has just beaten Silent Night, actually. So it's not unbeatable. But, you know, those wonderful melodies, you know, Charles Wesley, or, you know, I Vow to Thee My Country, which is from the Planets, Gustav Holst, and all those, just those great tunes. I mean, that's what it was. And so when I sit at a piano and I write, I'm just trying to do those, but without, you know, in a secular way. That's it, really. Genuinely, we'll see how many people buy the record. Because what's next for me depends on that. To a point. So, you know, I mean, I'm still going to make some music. I will make music. But, you know, whether I get a chance to release it, you know, genuinely, I don't know.